Hey friends, Maria McCormick here. I'm making another video today. These videos are more personable. I would love to just type out and write out my research more because I understand it's easier to scan through than sitting and watching a video, but I don't have time to do that. So hopefully you all have the time to watch these videos because I'm so excited to share with you today some of the research that I've been doing on hypothyroidism type 2. And I'm not sure if you've heard of this before. I had never heard of it prior to 2 or 3 months ago, when I came across this book, Hypothyroidism Type 2 by Dr. Mark Starr. This book is out of print, but this book is just absolutely phenomenal in what it reveals about the root cause of so many chronic health conditions that we don't see as being related to thyroid issues, but which are related to thyroid issues. So he describes in here the downstream effects of low thyroid function and how that is related to all these different diseases. If you remember my previous videos on multiple enzyme dysfunction, which I talked about how basically when the thyroid system is not working well and our body temperature is off, all of the enzyme systems in our body are affected because the way that these enzymes coil themselves, the way their physical structure, molecular structure, is dependent on body temperature. So when our body temperature is too high, which would be more like the case of hyperthyroidism, the enzymes are coiled too loosely, and when our body temperature is low, as in hypothyroidism, which is much more common, the enzymes are coiled too tightly. So what this means, this has huge implications, because if we're taking all the cofactors and nutrients we need for our enzyme systems to be optimized, but our body temperature is still too low, most of our systems aren't going to work very well, and this has so many downstream effects. So a lot of the symptoms that are associated with hypothyroidism are connective tissue disorders. I know people with migraine have a very high incidence of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, hypermobility. I certainly have hypermobility. Thinning hair is one of them that's typically associated with acne, sensitive to cold, high cholesterol. This is a really interesting one because almost all of my coaching clients with migraine have high cholesterol. And I've read a lot of literature on niacin and copper's ability to lower cholesterol. This is really interesting because copper is really needed for thyroid hormones to work, and niacin is really needed for the receptor sites on the cell to receive thyroid hormone. So this is really interesting because I never really understood particularly why those nutrients were known to lower cholesterol. But when we see it through the lens of hypothyroidism, a lot of these observations start to make sense. Let's see, sensitivity to cold. This is especially common in women, and women have a much higher incidence of hypothyroidism. We know that this is largely caused by the fact that estrogen lowers iodine, and iodine is needed for thyroid hormones. So women can experience dense breasts, endometriosis, fibromyalgia at higher rates, and all of these are downstream effects of hypothyroidism as well. So when women's estrogen levels are high, their iodine levels are low, and this of course is exacerbated by the fact that most of our diets are low in iodine, and then there's these toxic halides that are interfering with the receptor sites in our body's ability to use whatever iodine we are able to get into our diet. I talked about this in a previous video about copper and estrogen dominance and hypothyroidism if you want more details on those relationships. So some of the other symptoms that can come up with hypothyroidism are, besides high cholesterol, are dry skin, low body temperature, I already mentioned that, edema and swelling, and being overweight, although, as I will explain shortly, there are also cases of hypothyroidism where people are underweight, such as in my case. Fibromyalgia, cystic breast, I already mentioned that. These are just this is a small list of many of the symptoms that can arise from hypothyroidism. But we also need to distinguish between type 1 and type 2 hypothyroidism. So traditionally, if someone's trying to detect whether their thyroid is working properly or not, they go to the doctor and they get a TSH test, and this just measures the amount of circulating thyroid hormone in the body. So type 1 hypothyroidism is when there's insufficient supply of thyroid hormone, whereas Dr. Starr is distinguishing between that and type 2 hypothyroidism, which he defines as peripheral resistance to thyroid hormone at a cellular level. So this is about the receptor sites. Every single cell in our body needs thyroid hormone. And if we don't have the cofactors for these, they're called symporters. If the symporters won't work properly for thyroid hormone to get into the cell, which then will have implications in the cell's mitochondria's ability to produce ATP. This will then affect the whole system because then those cells will not be able to signal to the pituitary gland the need to make more thyroid hormone. So all of these feedback loops will be disrupted. Even if the thyroid is capable of making thyroid hormone, if these receptor sites on the cellular level are blocked by these halides or the cofactors aren't there for these symporters to work, people will develop type 2 hypothyroidism. And he points out that people who have type 1 hypothyroidism usually already had type 2, that type 1 develops from type 2. So the more we can support ourselves on a cellular level, support these symporters and support the cellular uptake of thyroid hormone, the better, the fewer of any of these symptoms people will have. And of course, migraine is one of those symptoms. And I've known for a long time that the thyroid is connected to migraine, but I always had my thyroid checked and my levels came back just fine. And I knew that those blood tests were inaccurate because I could tell when I had a migraine, my liver would ache, and then I would also feel a weird sensation in my thyroid gland, kind of like an achy sensation. And I could tell that at certain times of the month, my thyroid was not working optimally and that this was connected to liver congestion. So my approach up until now in helping to support my clients with chronic migraine has been to support the liver. The liver processes thyroid hormones, and a lot of migraine symptoms can be alleviated that way. But the opposite is also true, which I hadn't realized, which is that thyroid hormone affects how well the liver works. So this is super exciting to me because it means we have new ways to support people with migraine. And it also means that we can have the intelligence to probably assume that actually he's saying in this book about 80% of people have some degree of type 2 hypothyroidism. So we can use this information to assume that most people will gain benefit from having that system supported. And rather than relying on blood tests, the best way to test this light is kind of interfering here. I'm on a swivel chair. The best way to test for hypothyroidism is really not with blood tests, but with basal body temperature. And this is not always completely accurate. So what he's saying is basically between the symptoms that indicate that someone has hypothyroidism and the basal body temperature test, mixed with whether or not someone responds well to thyroid hormone, usually in the form of desiccated thyroid, those three factors are what confirms a diagnosis of hypothyroidism. So if you have low basal body temperature, you have all of these symptoms, and then you try desiccated thyroid and feel better, then that means that you had hypothyroidism. So let's see what to move on to next. Oh yeah, so myxedema is the historical technical term for hypothyroidism. And mix is the Greek word for mucin, and edema, of course, is swelling. So a lot of people with traditional type 1 hypothyroidism will be overweight and they'll have swelling. First, the eyes get swollen, or the face gets swollen. There are often bags under the eyes. Often the neck and thyroid area will get swollen, and the tongue will be swollen. When people stick their tongue out, they will have these scalloped edges, and that's from the swollen tongue pressing up against the inside of the teeth, creating this scalloped shape. So the better your thyroid works, the less swollen your tissues are, the less swollen your tongue is, and the less likely you are to have those little scalloped edges. I have it pretty mild now, and it is improving. I don't think my hypothyroidism was that severe previously, probably because I've been on zinc and copper for years, and I've been taking cofactors for thyroid support, but I had not been taking iodine. I actually used to get terrible headaches from taking even very small doses of kelp. I wasn't sure at the time, because this was before I had studied mineral balancing. I thought perhaps I was hyperthyroid and that the increased kelp and iodine was increasing my metabolism. but I don't actually think that's the case. I don't think I was hyperthyroid. One reason I wondered that is because I have a very thin body type. I don't gain weight very easily at all. And so a fast metabolism and hyperthyroidism are more consistent. But what he's pointing out in this book is that anyone who has a low body temperature, which I do, which is below 97.8, will have hypothyroidism even if they're thin and underweight. And what he says, the reason for this is that certain types of body types will basically generate a whole bunch of adrenaline as a response to the low cellular energy from hypothyroidism. So while some people will feel more sluggish and tired overall, other constitutions like myself, the body will perceive that low metabolic rate as a threat and will make efforts to compensate for that with increased production of adrenaline and stimulating the adrenal system, which then lowers the overall body weight. So I thought that was interesting. And he has shown that when these people who are thin and underweight and seemingly have a very fast metabolism, but actually have hypothyroidism, when they get more thyroid hormone and get their thyroid hormones balanced, they're able to gain weight again. But the majority of people who have traditional type 1 hypothyroidism will gain weight easily and will have a lot of swelling. And this swelling is from mucin, which is a jelly-like material that accumulates in people who have hypothyroidism. So you can grab your arm, and if there's a thickness and a swelling there, as well as in the face. Actually, there's some incredible historical photos in here in this book of people where you can really see the changes before and after taking thyroid hormone. Let's see if you can see these. This one right here is fascinating. You can see how this woman here, she doesn't even look like the same woman. This is her before thyroid hormone. See how swollen her upper lids are and her cheeks. This is her directly after thyroid hormone. She had no sex drive or interest in men. And then by the end of her treatment a few years later, she was married and in a romantic relationship, and look at how different her face is. You can see the characteristic swelling here under the eyes and puffiness of the myxedema. And then this is after thyroid treatment. Not everyone looks like this. The characteristics manifest differently in everyone, but these are some of the more traditional immediate signs here. This is before thyroid hormone and after. This is all desiccated thyroid. Before and after. You can see the quality of the hair changes quite a bit. I just think these historical photos are just amazing. I mean, look at the difference in this 14-year-old girl. This is her before the thyroid treatment and after the thyroid treatment. Let's see. Anyway, there's endless examples. Yeah, so let's see, where was I? So this book is mostly talking about taking desiccated thyroid hormone. So I guess Armour thyroid is desiccated thyroid. That's actually sourced directly from porcine thyroid gland, whereas some of the synthetic thyroid hormones on the market are given mostly to people with Hashimoto's, which is a more autoimmune thyroid disorder. But that synthetic thyroid hormone in the form of T4 and T3 does not contain T2. And T2 is a type of thyroid hormone that's underappreciated and mostly unknown. It's produced primarily by the ovaries. So a lot of women gain weight after they hit menopause because their ovaries are no longer producing as much T2 for their thyroid gland to function well. The thyroid gland does itself also make T2, but not, the combined effect of the T2 from the ovaries and the thyroid gland is overall supportive to thyroid function. All right, let's see. So I already mentioned that if you want to know if you have a hypothyroid condition, which if you're here and you have migraines, you almost certainly do, it's the basal metabolism test, then symptoms, your response to treatment, and then, elevated cholesterol is one way that they used to, it was known as a really good marker for whether people have hypothyroidism or not. Another cool thing about this high cholesterol thing is that they've also conversely found that when people's thyroid becomes improved, their cholesterol levels go down. So that's super awesome because that means the cause of heart disease is hypothyroidism. And to me, it's just amazing that this stuff was figured out and discovered in the 30s and 40s, and we're still pretending like these are separate conditions and that we don't have an answer to heart disease when we do. All right, this has implications for cancer as well, because iodine is really needed to combat cancer, since cancer is a high estrogen issue and elevated estrogen lowers iodine. Okay. I already mentioned in my previous video about the halides, so we also have this problem of bromide in brominated flour. You always want to eat organic flour, as well as the fluoridated water, which will inhibit the uptake of iodine and will block those receptor sites on the cell, leading to an epidemic of type 2 hypothyroidism. So this guy's opinion, of course, is that everything is related to type 2 hypothyroidism, or to thyroid hormone. And he says that the other neuroendocrine glands in the body do not function when there's insufficient thyroid hormone. So this would explain why, when you have sufficient, many other enzyme processes that are seemingly seen as distinct and different will be optimized. All right, also, harmful cellular waste products accumulate without proper thyroid hormone. This is important because when we're talking about edema, it's essentially lymphatic swelling, and part of it is from this buildup of mucin. But anytime we have edema and swelling, you're kind of in a mild state of sepsis, and your metabolic waste is not able to be cleared and detoxified from your body as well. And this is one cause of the headaches, is you're just living in kind of a toxic soup. And he's saying that basically thyroid hormone is essential for the body's ability to get rid of those metabolic waste. And I'm not sure the mechanism for that, of how that works. Yeah, I think I already mentioned this, that if you take your basal body temperature and you don't want to use a digital thermometer, you want to use, I mean, they used to use mercury thermometers, but an alcohol gas thermometer is what he said is the best. And if you're doing it under your armpit, you want to do it first thing in the morning before you get up, since our body temperature does fluctuate throughout the day. Do it under your armpit for 10 minutes. And he said for women, it's important to do it on day 2 and day 3 of their period. This is the time when your thyroid or your body temperature is the lowest. And so it's interesting to think about that, to think about how women get migraine, during their period, when their body temperature is the lowest, and when those enzyme systems just aren't going to be working as well with the low body temperature. I think that's fascinating. And I'd like to get more information as to why that is the case, what the mechanism is that causes the body to down-regulate the body temperature. All right, so yes, take your temperature on the 2nd and 3rd day of your period if you're a woman. But most of the people I work with, they already know that they have lower body temperature. A lot of people have been taking their body temperature during the COVID pandemic, on a daily basis, maybe before going to work or to school. And I had a client just the other day who said that she has observed and noticed that her body temperature is consistently lower than any of her family members. All right, so as far as, the solution to this problem, desiccated thyroid, I just want to point out that although I am largely against pharmaceuticals, especially the daily use of pharmaceuticals, of course I believe in antibiotics as an absolute last resort in certain situations, but I'm generally opposed to pharmaceuticals. And Armour Thyroid, even though it's owned by a pharmaceutical company, is not a synthetic chemical. It's basically a glandular supplement that's been very consistently produced so that people know that they're getting a very exact amount of thyroid hormones in there. An alternative to that is, this is Ancestral Supplements grass-fed beef thyroid. I don't have any relationship with this company. I'm not making any money in promoting them. There probably are other brands that also offer desiccated thyroid, and there isn't really any information in here about the actual amounts of T4 and T3 in this thyroid. This is also mixed with liver, so it's not as concentrated. But what they suggest on their website is gradually building up from 1 capsule up to 8 capsules a day. I'm on 4 capsules a day. I've had not even a glimmer of symptoms of any kind of headache. So if you want to understand more my pattern, although I've resolved all the chronic migraines, definitely there are times when, for example, if I drink alcohol or if it's overcast, I can feel little glimmerings of basically like brain fog, or just not feeling super clear-headed, or a slight headache occasionally emerging under certain conditions. And my head has felt clear as a bell. since being on this, and just a lot more energy. And I think that's partially also because of the iodine that I'm taking. So I started taking Lugol's iodine, which is potassium iodide. I do not recommend the J. Crow brand. I've noticed it's very diluted. This is the Carlisle brand. I started taking iodine prior to the beef thyroid and noticed a great boost in energy, and I'm up to 50 milligrams a day on this. It's amazing that I used to not be able to tolerate 1 milligram of kelp, and I think it's because at that time I was deficient in copper. So, this needs more testing out, but I think it may be true that if any of the major cofactors for thyroid hormone production are missing, whether that's selenium or copper or zinc or iodine, any of those minerals can cause an imbalance because you need all of them together, right? So it's interesting that I was able to tolerate this much after doing my high dose copper experiment. And even though I don't recommend being on high dose copper long term, I do think that got, going to a higher dose, and my overall maintenance dose of copper now is 6 milligrams a day. So I do think that I needed more. And I now have sufficient copper for my thyroid to produce the thyroid hormones, and that allowed the Lugol's iodine to be tolerated. That's my theory on it. I can't prove it. But it's remarkable to me that I used to not be able to take even 1 milligram of iodine, and now I can do 50 milligrams. Now, 50 milligrams is more than I would plan on taking long term, but this is just something I'm going to be doing for 3 months to try to dump the halides. So Dr. Fletchis has pointed out that, through thousands of case studies, they've shown through doing a urinalysis and seeing the percentage of iodine that's excreted from the body, that by the end of 3 months, most people on 50 milligrams of iodine will be excreting 90% of the iodine, which means that they've reached a tissue saturation of being iodine sufficient. And then they go down, he recommends them going down to a maintenance dose of 12 milligrams a day, which is the average amount that your average Japanese person gets. They eat a lot of seaweed and get a lot of iodine. Some people still need more than 12 milligrams. So we'll see after 3 months, after I dump the halides, and I'm not doing the urine therapy while I'm doing that, what my new maintenance dose becomes. So to support my thyroid, in addition to, the copper and selenium that I take, and I'm also I always take my B vitamins, so B2 and B3 are needed for those symporters, which are the cellular receptor sites for the thyroid hormone. B2, B3, and vitamin C are what are needed for those symporters, as well as iodine. And then for the actual hormone production, well, this is more like hormone replacement. I'm on 3 capsules of the beef thyroid, and I'm doing this mostly not for headaches, but for example, to get my cholesterol down. I actually haven't measured my cholesterol recently, but I'm pretty sure I'm probably high. My whole family tends towards high. So I've got the Lugol solution, the beef thyroid, and then I'm also experimenting with L-tyrosine, which is a precursor to thyroid hormone. And it could be that some people with migraine or hypothyroidism are genetically predisposed to not utilize tyrosine efficiently. So maybe you have all of the nutrient cofactors downstream, but you're actually missing that amino acid further upstream in sufficient supply, or you're not converting it into thyroid hormone efficiently. And this is 750 milligrams of L-tyrosine, and I have noticed this actually increases adrenaline, which is great in the morning because those who have their HPA axis is off and they feel tired in the evening, like around 4 o'clock, and then they get a second wind, and then they're up late at night and have insomnia, and then when they wake up in the morning they have virtually no energy. Those people may benefit from this. I've just been finding I'm lying in bed at 6 in the morning just feeling really clear and energized, which is something I've never experienced since becoming a mom. So this has really been helping me hugely. All right, that was probably enough for now. I hope you found this interesting. I totally recommend this book, Hypothyroidism Type 2 by Dr. Mark Starr. There's very detailed case reports and many, many, many ways that he connects other symptoms with hypothyroidism, all the way from toenail fungus to, a whole range of issues that we traditionally don't see as connected to hypothyroidism. It is out of print, but I got mine on Thrift Books. So if you want some interesting reading into nutrition, I recommend this book. Thanks for watching.